Right, thank you for your participation. You're free to go now. You may want to because Rob Mersola's up next. There are some people you meet that make such an impression on you. When you see them on the street, on the other side of the street, you cross across the street and you go up there and you shake their fucking hand and give them a hug. Rob Mersola is not one of those people. Rob Mersola is one of those people that when he shows up at a party, it feels like two people with really good taste just left. Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Mersola.
In the last couple years of the 20th century, I was young and dumb and ready to take the Big Apple by storm. Fresh out of grad school, I did what most aspiring actors do when they first move to New York City. I registered with a temp agency. Temping was actually pretty fun. A couple of days of work here, a couple of days of work there. You get to meet all kinds of weirdos in all kinds of weird places of the city that you never otherwise get to see. But of all the weirdo places with weirdo people, I have the distinction of, and I still hold this title to this day, of being the longest running temp in the weirdo-iest of all the weirdo places in all of New York City, perhaps the world. The Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Community Center. The New York LGBT Center was the first community center of its kind in the US. Founded in 1983 amidst the crisis of the AIDS epidemic, it was the meeting place for, and it witnessed the founding of organizations that would herald the equal rights movement for the LGBT community. GLAAD, SAGE, the Gay Men's Health Crisis, ACT UP, so many more. The historic Maritime Schoolhouse turned Gay Community Center at 208 West 13th Street is among the most important historic buildings of the LGBT movement. But when I first walked through those doors in the spring of 1999, it was nothing more than the greatest freak show I had ever been to. Freaky trannies in bad wigs, old men in hot pants, weirdo twinks dressed head to toe in rainbow flags, Midwestern lesbians in mom jeans, any kind of sissy fag or butch dyke you could imagine walked through those doors. And that was just the people who worked there. The visitors to the center were a whole nother level of weirdo. I'd come to the center for a couple weeks to help development switch their mailing database over to a new system. A few weeks turned into a few months, but when I unofficially started dating the head of human resources, there was pretty much no getting rid of me at the center. He was Little Rob, I was Big Rob. He was a fearless little twink who would get obnoxiously drunk and pick fights at bars. I picked him up off the sidewalk on several occasions after getting knocked on his ass by bouncers at gay and straight bars alike. He was just my speed. And we'd date on and off for about a year until we found out we were better friends than we were lovers, but he always had my back. So there I was unfireable at the center, but I wasn't really hireable because I wasn't qualified, nor did I have any real interest in being a gay activist. I did not unfurl the rainbow flag, I did not march, I didn't even know anybody who ever had HIV that I knew of. However, surprise, there I was, a gay activist. I was greeted each morning at the front desk by a gruff and grumpy, cockeyed lesbian, Julia. Took her a long time to warm up to me. She viewed me as a snotty Chelsea boy who looked down my nose at the oddballs at the center, and she was mostly right. We finally bonded over Xena and Buffy. And every Wednesday morning, we'd spend about an hour or so discussing the Buffy from the night before. Then I'd ride up the elevator, checking out the cute butts of the twinks in front of me, only for them to turn around and be little lesbians that dress like boys. And then I'd sit at my desk and I'd look through my mail. This consisted mostly of people from all over the city, all over the country, all over the world, who wanted to be added to the center mailing list to get the monthly newsletter, a sort of mini magazine that updated the gays on what was happening in the community, both politically and socially. I never even read the newsletter. What I did read, however, was the more than occasional thank you letter I'd get from weirdo people in remote places, explaining how where they lived, there was no gay news. There were no gay people, and the only sense of community they had was this newsletter that I sent out. And how grateful they were for the work that we did. I didn't even really work there. But, I did send out these newsletters, and I did help these weird people feel like they were not alone in the world. Surprise. I was a gay activist. I was in charge of 3 volunteers. Every Tuesday morning, I would bring Krispy Kremes to Frank, Alan, and Andre, who came in to help out however they could. Somewhere in their 70s, they would fuss over me and tell me dirty stories about the bathhouses and sex clubs of the 70s, and sometimes sad stories of their friends, basically a generation of kids younger than them that had died off. And maybe they couldn't march in the streets anymore, but they could do something. Surprise. These old men were gay activists. A year or so into my work at the center, I got a straight friend of mine a couple of weeks of temp work, stuffing envelopes. A very young, super cute, bubble butt friend. Let's call him Joshua Baton. If you don't know Josh, suffice it to say, a 25-year-old Josh was very popular at the gay center. A few days of him working there, and I got a call from Roz upstairs. Roz was head of the transgender department, a pioneer in the transgender movement. She'd started life as a teenage tranny hooker on the Lower East Side, and against all odds had risen to one of the leading voices for the transgender movement. And she was hot. Killer body, big boobs, beautiful face. The only thing that sort of gave her away was this weird Katharine Hepburn shake she had in her voice from a botched Adam's apple surgery. So Roz calls me up, talking about how cute my friend Josh is and whether he might be interested in going out with her. Aside from being way too young for her, I was like, geez, Roz, Josh is straight. No. I don't think he'd be interested in that, no. Oh, okay, she says, hangs up. A few minutes later, she calls me back. Can I ask you a question? Sure. Well, you said that your friend is straight, and that's why he wouldn't be interested in me. Do you think of me as a gay man? Honestly, I've never really thought about that before. Because I identify as a straight woman, and it's important to me that you treat me as such. We would become good friends after that, theater-going buddies. And she rewired the way that I thought and felt about the transgender community. And no surprise there. Roz was a straight activist. I made many trips delivering legal documents to the gay men's health crisis, seeing for the first time, firsthand, the devastating toll HIV had on the gay community. I met James in the waiting room there. He was an older black dude in his 50s or 60s or 70s. I couldn't tell. And we struck up a casual friendship. I'd run into him frequently at bars and coffee houses, and we'd sit and talk about art and life and cute boys. He was very smart. I looked at him as a wise old sage, a fairy godmother. And then one day, he just stopped showing up. Oops. That was the first dude I ever knew who died of HIV/AIDS. And surprise, I was a fucking gay activist. All told, I temped at the center for 2 solid years and held a staff position for just 1. I marched through cops in riot gear for Matthew Shepard. I rallied people to march on Washington. I ran the pit crew for the AIDS ride. I helped throw garden parties and Fire Island dances, and I helped raise millions of dollars for LGBT rights organizations. And I got the great privilege of partying with and learning from some of the most influential weirdos of the LGBT movement. Surprise, I was the accidental activist. And perhaps to speak back to Tim Cummings' potato, it seems particularly important today, when all of these rights that I accidentally fought for when I was young and dumb are in such great peril now, and that I'm old enough to understand that LGBT rights are human rights. So if you have marched for women, or marched for Black Lives Matter, or gun safety, if you've donated to the ACLU or Planned Parenthood, or done any small thing, intentional or accidental, for human rights in this world, well then, surprise, you're a gay activist too.
Thank you, Rob. It's interesting to see your serious and sensitive side. I don't like it.